As he said, my name is Jim Highsmith. When I introduce myself, you know, we talked a lot this week about individuals and interactions over process and tools, which is one of the Agile Manifesto principles. And as I got to thinking about that a little while back, I said, you know, I'm going to introduce myself differently. I want to tell you who I am as opposed to what I've done. And so who I am, who I feel I am, is an adventurer, a catalyst, and a storyteller. An adventure both in my private life and in my business life. So I've made a lot of pivots in my business career that have been a little scary. I'm also a mountaineer and rock climber and a lot of other sports. I'm sort of an average athlete in many different sports as opposed to a good athlete in one or two. I'm a catalyst. I've got a degree in management and a degree in engineering. And I've always been sort of somebody who helped bring those two groups together, or any two groups that function differently. One of the things I found, for example, in product development and systems and software development, there's a disdain for the marketing people. I had to do that job one time. I was a VP of marketing and sales for a company. It made me aware of other people's jobs and what they needed to do. So I've been a catalyst to bring people together. And one of the ways I've done that is by storytelling. So I like to tell stories, both my stories and client stories. And so that's a little bit about who I am. I want to start this in a little bit different fashion than maybe some of the other people. The development of a COVID vaccine is because of a biotech gene innovation called CRISPR. We made it through the COVID years, and I look back on them sometimes now and I thought, I just gave up 2 years of my life sitting in the house. I'm sure a lot of you did too. But CRISPR was a biotech advance that allowed the scientists to build a vaccine within about a year. That work began in 1987. The breakthrough came in 2012 with the work of Jennifer Doyle and Emmanuel Charpentier, and they were awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. So, a couple of questions. Do you think it's ethical and moral to use a CRISPR technology to eliminate a disease? That same technology would allow people that had enough money to alter the genes of their children in embryo and make them better, faster, prettier. You think that's a good use? Those are the to me, it's a visceral issue in biotech as opposed to some of the things we talk about in AI, but I think it's important. I found this quote recently: change is inevitable, transformation is a choice. And I really like that because it tells us a little bit about where we are and where we're going to go. But change is going to happen, and are we going to respond to it or not? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about a transformation journey today. We've heard some of this stuff already, but I think we're in a super cycle wave of change, and you heard that from Albin earlier, probably more than you wanted to. Enterprise transformation history. If you look back at the history of transformation in our industry, it's not gone well. And so we also want to come up with some ideas of how to tilt at these windmills of change. We've seen that the speed of impact of AI is pretty great. Now here's a hype cycle on the top and a technology adoption curve on the bottom. And so these things occur over time. What's happening is they're getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And so we're having to go through these phases really quickly. And the breadth of AI's impact is huge. It's in every facet of society, our personal lives, our businesses, our schools. And that's one thing that's different. It's sort of in that way like the internet. Although it has a lot more capability than the internet, it rides on that internet framework. So you've got all of this stuff that's big cloud computing, big data, AI, blockchain, all these technologies that are coming out. And then in the biotech world, if you look at the biotech and ask what are the 10 most exciting new technologies in biotech or new ideas in biotech, 8 out of the 10 will probably be related to AI. And then, how have we done? Pete Behrens and I, who Pete did the last session, did a ebook called Technology Innovations, Learning from the Past and Exploring the Future with AI. And we looked at lean manufacturing, agile software development, data-driven decisions, and digital transformation. We asked ourselves the question, what were the accomplishments and what were the disappointments? I like to use those two words rather than success and failure. Accomplishments and disappointments. Every project, every product, every initiative we go through has some benefits. It has some accomplishments. And they also have some disappointments. And we need to learn from those disappointments. There was an article written in Forbes a couple of years ago. 12 Reasons Your Digital Transformations Will Fail by Dr. Corey Block. Forbes survey was about 84%. And they looked at several studies by McKinsey, BCG, KPMG, and Bain, and they were all in the 70 to 90% range. Now, I don't know what they called failure, and maybe what that says is those were the failure rates for those 4 consulting companies. But one of the things of our survey did say it was about the people, not the technology, which is something we know. And so that's the message that we got out of looking at these past transformations. It's about leadership, mindset, and culture, which you've heard over and over and again the next couple of days. And we're going to try to delve into it a little bit deeper. So we're going to, in this thing this afternoon, we're going to look at rethinking the culture and mindset. We've talked about that. How do you actually go about doing that? Radical reorganization of organizations. You heard something about that from Bayer the other morning. Realignment. We have talked about overall measures of progress, of customer value rather than business benefits. Both are important, but we need to drive from customer value. Accelerate capability employment. I define capability as knowledge plus experience plus decision making. And I can go back to my mountaineering experience when I do that. I had a lot of knowledge that I read out of books and magazines and the internet about climbs. But when you actually get there and start to climb and you know, you face this ice wall that's 25 feet high, you know, you sort of go, gulp, do I really want to do that? And so experience, you take the knowledge and then you experience it and you learn from that. And then you have the thing is you have to make decisions about where you go. And so knowledge plus experience plus decision making is capability improvement. And then how do we integrate AI tools through all of this? And you're going to find out more about that this afternoon. Lastly, look at your challenge or look at your AI journey as an epic quest into the unknown. Don't look at it as a plan-do situation, but look at it as an envision, explore. Envision where you want to go. Explore into that. You're going to run into windmills. You're going to run into dragons. You're going to run into obstacles of all kinds. And it's overcoming those challenges that's going to be going to get you to the end. But go through an experimentation process. Pete talked about the AI lab that he's been running for 9 months. And Eric's been part of that, and I've been part of that. And it's an exploration. If we leave you with anything this week, these couple of days, you need an explorative process. Because these unknowns are going to come at us at time after time after time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Angie.
As Jim said, my name's Angie Doyle. I work for Nike. I'm in the digital transformation team. My focus is a little bit more on the lean, agile side of the transformation. I've worked on over 25 transformations with various organizations, primarily in South Africa, now based in the Netherlands. And one of the things I've realized about transformations in general, whether it's agile, digital, or AI, is it's not about that transformation, it's actually about a business transformation. There's always a problem that we're trying to solve with whatever this new term is, this buzzword that we've thrown out. My experience in agile transformations has varied from being very successful to being pretty dismal as well. And what I want to share with you is some of the things that we've done at Nike to really embrace the learning from previous transformations, hopefully getting us set up for what is coming. So I changed what I was going to speak about a little yesterday based on conversations I had with people, and I was sharing some of the stuff we were doing at Nike. I wasn't originally going to do this. That was going to really be saved for the deep dive. But I think it's important to bring in a practitioner's opinion into this conversation. So on the stage, I heard a lot of really awesome stuff, and honestly, if the first time I'd heard about AI was this morning, I may have been a little bit on the terrified side. So I want to just share some practical things you can do as a leader in your organization, really focusing on some of these rethinking, etc. Right? How do we embrace all of these different categories? So the first one that I'm going to start with is maybe to just say from a reorganized perspective, Nike's worked in an agile way for years. I'm not going to talk about the agile transformation. I want to talk about what's happened after, right? So we have continued on an agile evolution. We have continued to kind of evolve the ways of working over time, and we're already structured in cross-functional teams. We have a lot of collaboration between teams based in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, which is the teams I work with, and our global counterparts. We've got an environment where we can experiment a lot, and we have a fair amount of autonomy as well, enough given the large kind of corporate structure that we have. So I'm not going to talk about how we reorganized as a company. I'm going to talk a little bit around how we reorganized in my team based on some learnings that we had. But the first thing I want to speak about is that one statement, which is retrain. When I joined the team 2.5 years ago, we had people that were they were experts at agile practices. We had teams running Scrum, Kanban, etc. And what we very quickly realized when we did an assessment is we didn't always know why we were doing things. So we hadn't fallen in love with the problem that our business and stakeholders had. We were kind of just going through a bit of a process to get teams to be agile by following a set, list of things to do. So we started fundamentally rethinking, how do we start upskilling people for the future? As a leader for the team, that is my responsibility, is to figure out how do we actually ensure that people have transferable skills. What comes after agile for them? So we originally did an assessment, identified a couple of competencies, and later redirected to the Agile Coach and Growth Wheel. If you haven't seen it, it's actually a really great set of competencies every Agilist should have. And only one of the competencies is related to Lean Agile. The rest are transferable skills that a leader in any organization would probably do well to actually learn. So things like, how can you actually teach a concept? Are you able to coach? Can you mentor? Can you advise? Do you know the difference between advising and mentoring? And what we did was we went really back to the basics, retrained everyone on why we do these things in the first place. And we started realizing that when we started tackling things in a different way and got to the why, we realized that the teams we were working with didn't need us in the way that we thought that they did. They didn't need Agile 101, they needed whatever else was going to come after that. So we then flipped into a little bit more of a realign mode. So we then said to our business stakeholders, we realized that maybe we're missing some things. How do you want us to engage with you? And to do that, we did a bit of a health assessment. We called it a team health check. There was nothing to do with agile practices in there at all, but it was everything to do with an agile mindset. And we ran it with all of our teams. It was a facilitated session. And coming out of it, we started realizing that teams had very, very different needs, and we were missing it by going in with this agile kind of view on processes. The way that we did this health check, the way we scaled it to over 150 teams across EMEA, is we just started with one business area. So we said to the senior director of the space, are you keen to let us experiment? He said, go ahead, let's do it. We ran the health check. We got some really, really deep insights at a team level, aggregated it to a domain level as well, and were able to give him really deep insights, not just at a team level of what was happening, but in his domain as well. That health check that we did checked 18 different characteristics, and it checked things like, is a team focusing on continuous improvement? Do they have room to innovate? Are we giving them that time? Do they understand how their work connects with the mission of the organization? There were 6 criteria we asked every team to do. The rest of the 18 was optional. And like I said, most teams actually decided to do all of them, and we got some really good insights around generally where were we actually going to head, right, based on the feedback. That was the qualitative data that we got. We also went into more of a quantitative data. We had a team of people, a group of people in my team that were really, really good with metrics. Luckily, they were more focused on the outcomes and the insights from the data. And we started saying, what are things that we can measure to actually track how things are really working? So again, if we get stuck in the hype of a transformation, like in Agile, a lot of organizations start tracking things like velocity, which is a nonsense metric in my opinion, right? So we want to move away from stuff like that. It's useful for a team, it's not useful for anyone else, and it's not actually showing us how we are progressing to delivering value for our stakeholders, and that was really what we wanted to try get to. So we had a set of metrics, and we started reassessing what does success look like with these teams. We know that they have a set of things that they are struggling with. It's unique per team. And there are also some metrics that are giving us an indication of where we need to go. And then from that, we would then say, great, we've got an idea of what we need to do. We now need to reorganize as a lean agile team to actually serve our stakeholders a little bit better. So we did our initial pilot, rolled it out with a couple of other areas, and we started using the data from the teams to inform how we would engage with them going forward. And again, one of the learnings that we had is we had a similar model with all of the teams we were engaging with, 2 Scrum Masters to 1 team. And what we realized is some teams needed that. We called them a high-touch team. They needed to be embedded. They worked with them every day. And then other teams, we had a low-touch team. They were pretty effective. They were pretty high-performing. Were they the scrummiest Scrum team ever? No, but it's not what we were looking for. They were very effective. We just needed to figure out how to help them work on the next thing that they were interested in working on, right? Not what we as Agilists said they should work on, but what is the thing that's actually going to get them to the next level. So these low-touch teams, we started contracting with them quite specifically, saying, we're not going to be with you every day. You need to tell us, what are you prepared to work with us on, and we'll put a plan together and we'll help you on that. And then we also had a third type of team, which was a no-touch team. These were teams, they didn't need us. We almost acted like consultants. They came to us when they had a very specific need, and it immediately helped us get a much better balance between where we were spending our time. So we called that a rebalancing of our organization. That was how we reorganized around the problem within my space. So I've touched on 3 things so far. We retrained the Agilists to look at an Agile problem in a new and different way. We realigned around how we were measuring for success. This wasn't about how many teams are doing stand-ups. We didn't care. It was really around that mindset, how are they progressing? And then as a team, we reorganized around how we actually enable people and how we serve them best within the organization. The next thing that we're currently working on, or actually I want to talk a little bit more about the mindset stuff, right? So maybe this is a little bit around that rethinking. One thing we also realized is we were really bad at sharing with people why we made decisions, right? As a leader in the team, I always try to share the why and help people to understand the reason behind decisions I've made and really include them. And we were not doing the same thing for our team. So we would talk about transparency, but we weren't actually demonstrating it with people. So we had all these insights coming out of our health checks that we did. What we did is we made those results very, very transparent back to the teams. And then we would often use it as an opportunity to fundamentally shift our team around. People also need, Scrum Masters also need an opportunity to learn a new space. And within my team, I'm lucky, we work across all of the domains at Nike, so we could move someone from maybe a marketing technology team to a team handling systems in one of our distribution centers. So it was a great learning opportunity for our teams, and the key thing was it also got them exposed to different teams, and teams got exposed to a different way of coaching. So that was a big part of this journey as well, is we didn't want to get complacent. We needed to ensure that our teams were on a continuous learning journey as well. Again, transformation, it's always about learning, no matter which transformation you're in. The next thing that we did is we started coaching our Scrum Masters, this was part of the training, to, when they make a recommendation, be very clear around why this recommendation is in place. Up until that point, it had been very much a black box. The Scrum Master would come in and they'd say, we're going to do this thing, we're going to experiment with this, you're going to do this thing in the next sprint. And we said, that's great, but you've got to give your team, if you're expecting them to buy into this, you've got to give them a bit of a backlog that you're working on. You've got to have a little bit of a plan in place for them, a roadmap, if you will, of how you're actually going to coach the team over time. And they've got to buy into it, right? It's got to be aligned with their goals as a team, not just with ours from a transformation perspective. So they started working on something. One of the product managers in my space, we were like, oh, we think it's a coaching backlog recommendation. You know, this is what it does. And he was like, oh, it's like an evolution backlog. And we were like, that's exactly what this thing is. It's an evolution backlog to demonstrate how we're going to evolve teams over time. And we do something similar with each of our domains as well. We have an evolution backlog. For some of our teams, we have an R in brackets in front of our evolution backlog because it's quite revolutionary what we're doing. But for most of them, it's actually quite gradual, right? It's just gradual improvements that we're working with them on. And that fundamentally changed the way that we talk about problems, right? So we needed to get back into that mindset of really unpacking why we are doing the things that we're doing and to stop focusing on a process. And I know I've shared this sticker. We've got a lot of stickers in my team because, I mean, we work with engineers, and engineers do love stickers. So this was our latest campaign. It says not a process, right? So that was a key focus that we had, where we get stuck in transformations on following a set standard list of things to do because that is what the books tell us to do. And actually what we should be doing continuously is learning with the teams that we're working with. Maybe just to call out here, this was a gradual process, right? We started with a handful of teams, expanded into another domain, and gradually over time, we've now got an end-to-end view of all of the teams that we work with, all 150 of them in EMEA, around what do they need to do, where are they in their journey, and the most important thing that we did is we then said, from an agile coaching perspective, how are we tying our goals in with the strategy, right? So up until this point, it's always been hard to quantify some transformation work, especially for transformation agents. And what we said is if we're contracting with teams on something very specific, there is a possibility that what we're trying to improve with them is directly related to one of our strategic goals. And we've actually managed in all of the domains to quantify for each of our agilists what strategic value is their coaching adding and through what. Right? So again, that realigning, we're really reconsidering our measures of success. This isn't just about teams being agile, it's actually about helping teams get a lot more effective so that they can deliver on the strategy. Now, how does this tie into AI? Well, that's the next part of our journey where we are right now. So what we have, again, you know, the first time I'd heard about AI was this morning, I'd be pretty terrified. But what we've started doing is we've started educating everybody in the team. Right? As agilists, we work with engineers, and most of them are working with AI as well. And we can't be scared to speak to them about AI. We can't be worried about how they're using AI. So we've done a lot of confronting of reality around the state of agility as well. Over the past 2 years, there's been a lot in the media around it. And we're embracing AI to really augment how we support our teams. And that's really the journey that we're in now. Now that we've got a model of these high-touch, low-touch, no-touch teams, we're working out every day how do we actually engage with teams, the competencies that we use, and we are figuring out how to enable our own team first. This is a much lower barrier to entry than trying to figure out how are we going to be supporting our teams on their AI journey. So again, a little bit of the fear has been taken away just about that retooling side. As we move into an AI environment, we need to make sure that we're comfortable too with what's happening in our own domains. And we're actually letting our Scrum Masters disrupt their own roles, if you will. They're the ones that are guiding us about where should we use AI, what are some of the things that we've done in the past that we no longer need to do. So examples of the pilot that we're running at the moment is Scrum Masters are working with some of our no-touch teams, and they're taking things like their metrics, they're running them through our AI tool to give some insights so that the team can actually figure out at least a good enough direction on where to go without necessarily having a Scrum lead there. And then their skill set that we've been growing over time, which is all of those transferable skills, coaching, mentoring, teaching, etc., that's the stuff that our Scrum leads are focusing on. Hopefully elevating them to other roles outside of Agile, because it is going to be interesting where the next couple of years take this industry. So anyway, what I wanted to do was just share with you a little bit around a practical journey, because I think sometimes it can feel really intimidating as a leader. Where do you start? Especially if you don't have the authority in your organization to fundamentally reorganize your whole organization. Many of us are recipients of that. We're not always the active, directors of the change. So there's always something you can do and steps that you can start. The key thing is enabling your team to do the work. Every single person in my team worked on one of the working groups that we had. It was very transparent, and we encouraged people to really think outside the box on how we were using a lot of the things that we had put in place. And yeah, in the deep dive, I've got a lot of other examples of things that we've done practically within Nike that I'm happy to share as well in some of the conversations. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Curt.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can get this to work. Okay, this is me. Good morning. It's great to be in this wonderful country with such friendly, terrific people. I must say, I'm stunned at how lovely this country is. I live in California, and so it feels very familiar to me here. I want to talk to you about a little journey that I went through. I used to work for big companies, RCA, GE. I spent millions of dollars a year. I was really good at spending money. But then all of a sudden, I became part of SRI, which was a smaller company. It's still a big company, but it was smaller. And instead of spending money, I had to earn money. And I discovered I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to create value. They don't teach you how to create value in most big companies. So we started on a journey, and the key concept was we have to learn. Innovation is about learning. It's about learning faster than the competition. When I went to the company, it was bankrupt. They were losing money every year. The buildings were falling down, and everybody hated each other. It was a really nice place. It wasn't Silicon Valley. And we put in place the ideas that I'm going to talk about very briefly now and then more in the afternoon. When I left, we were creating another multi-billion-dollar business every couple of years. My teams won 2 Emmys, one for high-definition television, one for satellite broadcasting. We created Nuance, that was a $20 billion company. We created robotic surgery with Intuitive Surgical. That's a $150 billion company. We created Siri, we sold that to Steve Jobs. That was a $75 billion business. So the same people who've been failing for 20 years, by giving them the right skills, not only were growing, we grew 3.5 times, but we're systematically changing the world in a positive way. I wrote a book about this, if you're interested. So let me ask the audience here. How many of you are value creators? Can you raise your hand? Why would anybody in this audience not raise your hand? Why are you here? Why are you here? Is it the job of every professional to create value for others? Who here is a professional that doesn't feel like their job is to create value for others? Raise your hand. No, you probably don't want to do that. Isn't it your job? Whether it's internal or external, management is fundamental, but the most fundamental responsibility of management is the ability to create and deliver value to others. That is the most important job you've got, because if you cannot do that, you have no value as a manager. That is your job. Now, I do this in companies all the time, and I get a reaction like this. And that indicates kind of the gap that we have. Peter Drucker, who was mentioned a lot, said the purpose of a business is to create and keep a customer. The business enterprise has two, and only two, basic functions: marketing and innovation. All the rest are costs. Your fundamental job is to create value. That is your job, whether you're in the military or in education or in a regular business. My clicker's not working here. Okay. So how many of you would have a value creation process in your company? Now, I want to put a caveat on that. If I were to walk around and talk to your middle-level managers, could they all describe the system the same way? That's the criteria. How many of you have a company like that, where I could do that little walk and get the same answer? How many companies here? Okay, I get one hand. You have a small company, right? Okay, so I've done this test hundreds of times in leading companies you all know. So far, it's 0. The ones that say they do Agile, still 0. Scrum, 0. Six Sigma, still 0. Mostly you find it's not true. Now, of course, they're exceptional people, so that's, yeah, you always have to remember that. Here's a quote I like. Every CEO at least give lip service to the idea that the world is moving faster and we need to do a better job in innovation. But if you go into an organization and ask people to describe their innovation system, you get blank looks. They have none. Every CEO will say they have one. But if you go inside and walk around, you discover it's just not true. Again, there are exceptions, I know, particularly with small teams and companies, but as a rule, that's what you find. The result is most performance is poor. I've done workshops in hundreds of companies around the world, companies you'd know, Lockheed Martin, Samsung, Volkswagen, you name it, I've done it. Typically, we find that less than 25% of what they're working on has any value for anybody. In some cases, it's 0. And it's not because of the people. These are PhDs from the best schools around the world, MBAs from the best schools around the world. But you go through a 2-day workshop, and then they decide, whoops, most of what we're working on has no value for anybody. Tech transfer is even worse because they do even fewer of the right things. Here are 3 things I look for when I go into a company. I call them the 3 laws of value creation, because if you're not doing these 3 things, you have no chance, basically, of being systematically successful. First off, do your people know what an important unmet need is? Do they work on things that matter? Because if you don't work on things that matter, you can't make an impact. Most people work on interesting things, not important things. Rule number 1. Number 2, do you have shared concepts, tools, and methods? In other words, do you share the language of value creation, which is the one common language? You all have common languages. So the military has a common language. Universities have common language. But if you want to do value creation, you have to use the language of the customer. If you don't focus on the language of the customer, it's kind of like a Tower of Babel. You talk past each other all the time. Morningstar is a brilliant example of a company that has developed a common language which makes it possible for their company to be successful. Extraordinary achievement. Most companies don't have that. And the third thing is, as we've been talking about, innovation comes from teams. You've got to put interdisciplinary teams together, and they have to iterate positively, supportively, learning in the best ways. We call them value creation forums. I'll discuss them this afternoon, but they're kind of magic when you're in them, because we use fundamental education principles, and that's what we do. So, remarkably, those results that I achieved before were without AI. Imagine if I went to the company I had AI now. I'm going to show you an example. I can't even imagine what we could have created with AI. That was without AI. Everything was hand-to-hand combat to make those things happen. So, I'm going to give you, here's one example of something we teach everybody. You want to address an important unmet end user and market need. So everything starts with a need, right? Everyone would agree? Every conversation in your company starts with a need statement, right? How many of you do that? Okay, I hope there's some out there. I've never been in one. I've never been in one. Need. Everything starts with a need, whether internal or external. What's your approach for the offering and its viability model? Both the offering and the viability model. What are the benefits per cost? That's the definition of customer value. And what about the competition and alternatives? So our job as professionals and innovators is to identify important unmet needs, come up with unique, compelling, and defensible approaches with a business model with superior benefits per cost when compared to the competition and all the alternatives. And we add a hook because you always want to have a story. Start with a story to get people interested in why it's important so they can remember it. And then you end up with an action, what you're going to do next. How many of you have been in a meeting where there was no action at the end of the meeting? Who's ever been there? It's pretty stupid, isn't it? How much waste is there from that one thing? Enormous. So this is the way we run all of our meetings. Oh, by the way, you're only going to get 5 minutes to give this pitch. And you're going to stand up every month and give it again. You're going to stand up and you're going to be quiet, and people are going to give you feedback from different perspectives. The end user, the investors, your partners. You're going to do that every month. We all did that. Curt did that. The CEO did that. Because I was meeting with people like you all the time, and I had to know enough about what you're interested in to have a conversation with you. So we all did this. It's about learning. So this is one of the concepts we taught everybody. And after a while, everybody in the company knew at least this much. So there was a common language across everyone. You walk into a meeting, they would know it starts with a need. Everyone, from the guards to the CEOs of our companies. Everyone knew every conversation started with a need. That one idea, if you do this one thing, I guarantee you it's transformative. Okay, so along comes AI, and as our panelists have discussed, you can use scripts to represent ideas. We focus on the big ideas of value creation. I just showed you a big idea. That's a big idea. So you can turn that into a script, put it into AI, and iterate with it, ask how things could be improved, get ideas from it, and learn what that's all about. And of course, you have to be careful with it. Until we have our own proprietary ones, you just can't share your IP. But you can learn a lot about the structure and the framework and how to give a pitch and how to improve it. And I want to end by showing you a presentation of a college student who I asked. I didn't coach her at all. I gave her a tutor, a very simple tutor, for the value proposition. And she submitted her proposal in a competition, and she was picked. And there were 5 of them. And after we picked the 5, they came into one of our value creation forums where they presented for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and 5 minutes. Each one of those was an hour. So over a month, she'd never given a presentation before. She had no idea what a value proposition was. And in 1 month, by starting with the AI tutor, a very simple one, by the way, not what our speakers were talking about, that's not what you were talking about, a very simple AI tutor, she produced this.
Hi everyone, again my name is Abigail Holmes and I'm excited to share with you my idea for an arthroscopically deployed wound dressing to treat connective tissue tears. Now when I was 12 years old, I tore through the labrum in my hip from simply standing up. It took years of hospitalizations, doctor's appointments, and pain medications to ultimately realize that I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, a chronic connective tissue disorder. I'm not alone in this, as 1 in 5,000 children each year are born with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome or EDS. EDS is present at birth and becomes continuously more debilitating with age. In fact, 88% of EDS patients report chronic joint pain and 61% report walking impairment. EDS is caused by a mutation in the gene that produces collagen in the body, which is detrimental considering that collagen is an essential structural support present in over 80% of the body. As seen here, healthy collagen is organized and linear in fashion, as opposed to the mutated collagen, which is nonlinear and disorganized, resulting in joint instability and weakened connective tissue. The current ecosystem is dire. EDS patients are prone to severe tissue tears after minimal physical trauma. This makes everyday activities such as standing up or even brushing your teeth potentially catastrophic. Tearing connective tissue in a joint can lead to significant pain, the possibility of permanent disability, and often requires corrective surgery. The problem is that current methods of surgical repair are ineffective on EDS patients due to weakened tissue. Alternative treatments such as physical therapy are standard protocols, even though they do not heal the injury or target the root cause of the pain and instability. The limiting factor is that traditional surgical suture methods do not account for weakened tissues and cause additional damage. Therefore, the need then exists to create an internal wound dressing that is arthroscopically deployable, adequately distributes mechanical strength, mimics the natural healing process, and maintains integrity for at least 5 years. I see a white space to provide a treatment for a chronic injury common among the 1.6 million EDS patients worldwide. I expect beachhead customers to be patients with a debilitating tear of 4 to 6 millimeters in the hip that would traditionally require surgery. The proposed approach is an arthroscopically deployed wound dressing to treat connective tissue tears. The solution consists of two main components: a therapeutic hydrogel infused with growth factors, which will be injected into the injured area, and a robust network of collagen fibers that will be 3D printed within the body. These collagen fibers will be integrated into the hydrogel to reinforce the wound dressing, evenly distribute load across the tissue, and guide the growth of healthy tissue. Now, let's take a step-by-step look at this approach. We begin with the injured labrum surrounded by inflammation and encompassed by healthy cells. Next, we're going to inject the hydrogel to fill the void created by the wound as well as to overlap with the healthy tissue area. Next, we'll arthroscopically bioprint the collagen fibers across the hydrogel and the wound site. This collagen scaffold will provide a mechanical and directional support for the cells to grow across. I expect that healthy tissue will proliferate from the scaffold and ultimately close the wound. I have identified the top 3 risks for this product as market adoption, efficacy, and scalability. I plan to mitigate these by discussing the approach with at least 10 orthopedic surgeons to assess feasibility, conducting thorough material testing to assess efficacy, and discussing the approach with manufacturers to design a product that is scalable beyond the lab bench. For end users, I anticipate that the approach will have surgical costs similar to current methods, which typically range from $7,000 to $32,000 depending on the severity of the injury. This cost is relatively small in comparison to the improved quality of life that it offers, allowing individuals to avoid the 28% increase in income required by those with physical disabilities and reducing chronic pain. As part of WPI's Senior Capstone Project, I have received an initial investment of a little over $1,200 from WPI, which will be used to create a 3D cell culture model of EDS to be used for future testing of the treatment. As the product develops, R&D expenses will increase. However, this investment ultimately offers the advantage of gaining a share in the global wound closure market, which is valued at $13.7 billion. The main competitors for this method are traditional surgery, physical therapy, and pain medications. When it comes to EDS patients, traditional surgery presents several challenges. Sutures take twice as long, often lead to additional tears, and have a significantly higher risk of infection, which is why they are generally avoided. While physical therapy and pain medications can offer some relief to patients, they do not directly address the underlying injury. Based on a thorough literature review, there is currently no other research that's focusing on correcting tissue tears in EDS patients, indicating a lack of new competition in this field for at least a decade. The next phase of this project is taking place as a WPI MQP, in which I'm developing a cellular model of the impaired wound healing to be used for future testing. Now that a full literature review is complete, I'm moving into the design phase to be completed by December, followed by experimentation completed by March 2024, with the final publication being released before May 2024. The next steps would be to source seed funding and begin designing the treatment components. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing your feedback.
What percent of the employees in your companies could give a presentation of that quality? I've never been in a company. They're never that good. And she did this by a combination of AI plus the real part with real people iterating the human part of it. It wasn't one or the other, it was the combination. So that's how we created Siri, same way. That's how we could beat by IBM by 7 years with Siri with no money and no resources like them, because we were learning faster and we were producing presentations like that throughout the entire company. I'll skip that. So this afternoon, if you're interested in this, I'll show you how you can become Abigail's in your companies, if you're interested. It's not that hard, but there are certain fundamental things you've got to do. And as I think the last real skill in the age of AI is the ability to create value for others. So I think it's not only a really interesting thing, I think it's an imperative for your career. And AI is actually going to be your friendly partner to give you those skills. So thank you very much.